through the timeline of the Tucker trade. Just when did it start to feel like this was a deal that you guys would be able to complete? And just what does it mean adding a player of his caliber to this lineup?
Sure. I'm trying to think back. I mean, I think my first conversation with Dana Brown about Tucker was right after the GM meetings. I think we sort of missed each other when we were in San Antonio, and then we talked on the phone, right after that. And he mentioned to me that Tucker could potentially be available. And obviously, as you guys know, we sort of talked about this all summer. Like that was the kind of player that we felt like we were lacking, and we obviously wanted to go after. I think we talked a lot on the phone from that point forward. It's hard to ever say when you think a deal is close, but obviously we felt like we were inching closer when we were in Dallas, and obviously it was nice to get it done soon after that. So, um, like I said before, I think we talked all summer. You guys asked me a lot of questions about our roster and how it was constructed, and we have a lot of really good players on the team. We're very balanced, but it did feel like we lacked that kind of consolidation of war, I would say, on our roster in one player. And obviously Tucker's, just one of the best players in baseball, period. And obviously to acquire a player like that, it comes at a real price, but it's a price we're willing to pay, given the fact that that was something we felt all summer that we lacked, and something we really wanted to bring to this team.
Jed, kind
Jed,
of going off of
no, you
that.
could, no, you got it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. uh, going off of that, just how does where you are in your championship window play into what you're willing to give up?
Well, I think, yeah, I think you wouldn't make this kind of deal if you felt like you didn't have a lot of good players around a player like Tucker. I think that, or like, going back to, kind of 21, 22, it wouldn't have made sense to do this deal. I think that it made a lot of sense for us to do it with where we are right now, given the players around and given the construction of our roster. One of the things we talked about a lot over the course of the winter and in course of the planning phase of our offseason was that there's finite number of ways that we can really improve as a team, especially on a position player side, because in order to get a player that's better than our internal replacement level, you have to go fairly high. We have a lot of good players. We're very balanced, and so there's just not that many players out there that were available that we felt like, okay, this player clearly makes us a better team. He provides something we don't have, and obviously, Tucker provides that. So that was a big part of the impetus to doing the trade.
Jed, I mean, obviously the trade makes sense, trading prospect and other guys for a veteran, but with 1 year left on Tucker's deal, what's the kind of calculus to deciding that you're going to give up someone with Cam Smith's upside for a guy that could bolt after a year?
Sure. Well, I think anytime it's very difficult to acquire players of this caliber. They're not available often. So I think getting a chance to bring him in. Obviously, we have him under control for 1 year. I don't know what the future holds, but obviously Chicago sells itself really well, and so I mean, like I said, I'm excited to bring him in, for this year, and we'll see where it goes beyond that. But clearly, this was the kind of player that we lacked. I think that I think that as we think about our team and what could clearly make the team better, and there's a real goal to be a better team, in 2025 than we were in 23 and 24. Going out and acquiring a player of this caliber made a lot of sense for 2025.
Just to follow real quick, I mean, do you think Chicago's great, but money is good too? Do you think you guys are gonna have the resources to make him a competitive offer if things go well this year?
Yeah, I think that's something that we'll discuss in the future. I think that there's no point in speculating on that, today as we sit here in December.
Jed, everyone's kind of wondering what the next move is. I mean, what are the chances that Bellinger, Suzuki, Bush, and Tucker are all on the roster come spring training?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we definitely have some surplus there. We have a lot of good players, trying to figure out how those fit together. So that's certainly something we'll discuss, over the next little bit. I don't want to talk about the availability or possibility of any individual player, but yeah, certainly with those guys, all potentially playing the same positions, that what you're asking makes some sense.
Yeah,
Jed,
Jed, what's the organization's comfort level when it comes to Michael Bush playing third base, possibly?
We really see Michael as a Gold Glove first baseman, and that's our focus. Can he move around a little bit? Of course, like his versatility is great, but he made real strides at first. I thought after the first month of the season, he was fantastic at first, and that's certainly how we're seeing him.
Jed,
Jed,
going off
beyond
that,
the timing being right for this move, how much of a factor was it that it's been a while since you guys haven't made the playoffs? Maybe there's a little outside pressure to kind of push all in, and even the concept that, you're on the final year of your deal and there's a little pressure there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I always think all in is sort of a narrative. I think that you're always doing moves for now and for the future and trying to balance those. And I think when you think about like I'll use a player like Wisniewski as an example. We acquired him, in a trade where we were, getting back future assets, and so there's sometimes you gather future assets, and sometimes you push some of those assets forward in order to acquire a player like Tucker. So I do think there's always that push pull of the things you're doing for now and things you're doing for the future. Ultimately, our goal was to try to be a better team than last year, and that's been our focus. I think we. Last year, the way the shape of the season was disappointing. I think we felt like we were a little better team than our record, but the goal is to keep pushing, and I think Tucker does that. And honestly, like my own situation, like that's not a concern. I think that for me, I don't look at it that way. I think that I've been in the game for a long time. I'm confident in my abilities and my resume, and I just think that like this is my job always is to be the best steward of the organization. I try to make good decisions, for the Ricketts family, try to make sure that I'm setting us up for a good future, but also trying to set us up for an exciting present. And I don't think this deal is in any way in conflict with that.
Have you talked
internally
at all about an extension, or is that something you'll
I wouldn't
take?
talk about that. Yeah.
internally, Jed, how about the feel good for the people in the organization, and maybe, the most important trade that you've made, acquisition you guys made since, 17 or 18?
Yeah, I mean, we had scouting meetings yesterday, and I think that one of the things I complimented people on is like in order to have the resources, the player resources to make a deal like this, it comes with a lot of good scouting, a lot of good acquisitions. I think Paredes was a player we really liked, and we were able to acquire at the deadline, and obviously Houston liked him. We were able to acquire Wisniewski for Efros, and I think that was in 22, and then obviously a really good draft pick last year. So you have to make a lot of good decisions to be in that position. And I would say that even with this, our future is really bright. We still have a really good farm system. We have really clean financial books and some ability to make moves in the future. So I don't see this move as precluding any of those things. And we traded some really good players to get a player that we feel like is one of the top players in the game, and it makes a lot of sense for us now with where we are in our competitive window.
Is the organization's confidence as far as Shaw's best position to be successful on defense?
Yeah, I think he can play second well. He can play third well. I think right now, obviously, we're going to give him a long look at third. After we traded Paredes, but I think making room for young players is really important. I mean, he has to earn that job. I'm not going to gift him that job on a conference call in the middle of December, but certainly with what he's done in the minor leagues since we've had him, he's played really well. He obviously played really well in the P12 after the season, and I think his arrow is really pointing up. And I do think it's important, just like we did last year with PCA. You've got to give young players some runway and some ability to play, and obviously it's not always linear, as we talk about, but certainly you've got to give at bats to talented young players, and Matt has certainly put himself in position to be considered for something like that.
Kind of off of that, do you anticipate like either via trade or free agency, try to bring in someone with a little bit more veteran experience to at least go into camp having some other options at third?
Yeah, in general, in the infield, I think that's something we'll be looking at. I think that obviously trying to, round out the rest of the team, make sure that we think about our different redundancies in different areas, try to make sure that we don't feel exposed at any one position is really important. So I think that might be an area we do look at.
Jed, what did you think about when you were looking at the second catcher? What did you prioritize, and why was Carson Kelly the right player for that spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Carson does a lot of things really well. One of the things that was really appealing to us was his defense. He throws well, which I think is really important in today's game with a lot of base stealing. And so I think we prioritize just getting a really good player. But I do think that the defensive part was something that we talked about extensively. And again, I think throwing, it is a really important aspect of baseball in 2025. And I think in our division in particular, we have some athletic teams that run in our division. So making sure we don't lose sight of that was important. I think Carson, certainly checks those boxes.
Jed, obviously Hayden was part of the starting pitching depth on the major league roster with him obviously not in Houston. Do you still feel like that's a position, at least depth wise, that you'd be looking to address the rest of the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you ever stop trying to address that, and we'll continue to look for pitching. It takes a lot of arms, a lot of really good arms to get through the season, and not only will we be looking for on the free agent market, but just try to make like small moves that improve that. I think that part of part of it is feeling good about our pitching infrastructure, trying to find guys that maybe transactions that maybe aren't headlines over the course of the winter, but guys that we feel like we can bring in, that we can make better, that can provide that depth. I think you don't have to look any further than the playoffs this year to realize like the amount of arms it takes to get through the marathon in this day and age. There's a lot more injuries than there were. Guys don't throw as many innings, and so I do think that that's something you never stop looking at.
Jed, you mentioned we've been talking about the consolidation of WAR aspect for a while, finding that player for a while. When you guys acquired Paredes, did you obviously you liked the player, but was it a thought back then that, hey, this guy has a lot of control and a lot of value, maybe we can take advantage of it in the offseason and get someone that we're looking for?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say we didn't get him with the intention of spinning him. I would say that when we did trade for him, I can't remember the exact day we traded for him. It was a couple of days before the deadline. I was going to say we had a lot of teams calling in a couple of days between, which kind of gave us a sense of his value. So I think when it was obvious Tucker was available, we had talked to Houston, briefly right after the Paredes trade. They had called us. I think they had been on him when he was at Tampa. So we certainly weren't looking to spin him or flip him. I think he's a really good player, and that wasn't our focus. It was more, but we sort of knew he had some value with Houston because they had called at the deadline.
Jed, kind of on the topic of that, like consolidation of WAR, is there like a trickle-down effect on the rest of the lineup? And how do you feel a guy like Tucker can kind of help the complexion overall of the entire lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an age-old question. There's like, does a player like that, like Tucker, have an impact on everyone? I feel like, like I said, I look at it more as the complete player. Like one of the things that Tucker does so well, and he's so valuable, is he does everything well. He runs the bases well. He plays really good defense. He's a great offensive player. So really, I think more of our focus was this is a player that we can bring in that does everything really well. Like I say, he's a really high value player, and on a team that has a lot of players projected roughly the same, he provides something we just simply didn't have on our team last year. And I think we talked about this in the postseason press conference that, all the teams that sort of made the playoffs had some version of this. And sometimes that player, there are players on our team that could provide that, but certainly this was a kind of I want to say more certain because it's baseball, but they certainly a player that projects to be at that level going into the season was something we just didn't have on our roster.
Is there any hesitation using any more of your top elite farm system guys, top 5-7 guys in future deals, or is, as you've always informed us, that's why we get players to use for a major league team and to get others?
Yeah, I think everything is a one-off decision. Like, does this make us better now? What is this doing for the future? I think that's a constant balance. So I don't think you do one deal and say like that prohibits a bunch of other deals. I think, but everything is done in concert, and I think you have to figure all those things out and make that determination. But ultimately, the goal isn't to the goal is to be a better team next year, but certainly the goal isn't to be only good next year. And I think that's always going to be a focus, that you're going to always have that the present future balance. And I think that that'll now that we've made the Tucker deal, like that'll be a consideration in the future deals we do.
Jed, just to put a fine point on Tucker's future, are you interested in engaging in extension talks? Do you see openness on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, like of course you want players like Kyle Tucker for a long time. There's no question. I mean, again, he's at such an elite level in our game. I mean, are you ever going to know if we're having extension talks? Like, no. So I wouldn't comment on it, but like, of course, like, when you acquire a player like that, you want to have that player for a long time. And, I think that, certainly there will be contact with his agents, that we'll have discussions. We'll keep those internal. But yeah, I think that you always kind of look at it that way. You want good players for a long time.
The meetings that you talked about, are they kind of replacing the organization meetings that usually take place later? Is that what you're doing the few days here?
Yeah, we have a lot of player development in town. All of our scouting staff's in town, and we try to have meetings at various times of the year. We had leadership meetings in October, so I think it's always good to get everyone together and talk about our direction and what we can do better. And there'll be a good few days of meetings.
Jed, you mentioned last week that you were kind of like in the fourth or fifth inning of the offseason. Does this kind of accelerate where you view your team building is, or is there still more to come?
Yeah, I mean, it's still early in the offseason, and certainly there's a lot of players out there, and our team's not complete, so we'll continue to make a lot of moves. So I think that we're not done. We have to continue to round out the team to get better for next year, and we'll work on that for the next couple months.
Industry-wise, it looks like more people are concentrating on trades. For the people that you talked to since you were at the winter meetings and now, is that the perception you get, that people are kind of putting the free agency on the back burner as they discuss deals?
I mean, I can only speak for us. And I think I said to you guys at the meetings that more of our discussions were on trades and free agency. And I think that's continued, but I can't speak for what other people are doing out there. That was the Cubs' focus.
Hey, Jed, I mean, now you basically have three good to great right fielders. Where does this move leave Seiya and Bellinger with, a lot of time to go still in the offseason?
Yeah, I tried to answer that before. I mean, I think, obviously, we'll have discussions around them. I think that, obviously they're all really good players, and there may be some overlap in playing challenges there, or maybe we can make it work. So I think we'll continue to have discussions about that, and if something makes sense for next year, we would talk about it. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about like any individual players' likelihood of being traded. I don't think that's fair to them, and it's not really that smart in terms of a organizational standpoint.
Well, you're just someone who always kind of thinks about like worst case scenarios, like if some guy goes down.
Yeah.
Is that part of the conversation now? Like, do you have to trade one of those two guys, or could you kind of run it back and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think depth is important. Obviously, I think there's depth is important. There's also you're thinking about like how does this work from a resources standpoint and a allocation standpoint and a playing time standpoint. So I think those are all discussions we've been having.
Jed, kind of building off what Patrick's saying, Seiya clearly doesn't seem to be interested in being the designated hitter on a regular basis. Like, is that a concern as you weigh stuff like that? Do you feel like he's still the type of player that could be productive, maybe if he isn't altogether too happy, being a full-time or a primary DH?
Yeah, I mean, he was a great hitter for us in the second half in that role, and I think he's a really productive hitter. So I mean, I think that I'm excited he's a Cub.
Did you send the rookie the material to him? I mean, a presentation material to them? Did you?
You can't quote that. I'm not going to comment on anything regarding rookie, but I appreciate you asking.
All right.